Everybody say, keep on rocking.
Number one! Number one! They're jumping up and down in the control room, yelling, number one! Chubby Checker came up to me once and he said, Rick, I bet you lighted a lot of fuses, didn't you? And I went like, oh, Chubby, man, that sounds... We got cheated out of so much money, but I was given a career. He said, so that's the last album of mine you're playing on. And it was.
Oh, yeah. Let's give it to him right now.
And when he came in, he had threads from his sweater pulled out, things like 3 feet long, parts of it stretched all out. A chunk of his hair was cut out. Can I join your band, Edgar? And he asked me, he said, yeah. And I can't look back at that and say, oh, the record business was wrong. No, I was stupid. My mom had been a singer, and my uncle was a guitar player. And when they were young, they were kind of a duo. She sang, he played guitar. I got a guitar when I was 9 years old, and my parents bought me an electric guitar. My uncle played a little bit, so we went over and he showed me some stuff. Some local people showed me some stuff. I started playing immediately. My brother wanted to join in somehow. He was younger than me, and he didn't know yet what he wanted to do. So my parents went out not knowing and bought him an accordion. Well, things haven't changed that much between then and now. He was taking lessons, but he wasn't totally happy playing the accordion. But they got him a set of drums. So my brother and I were playing. Immediately, we looked at each other and went, wow, this is pretty cool. You on drums and me on guitar. And we started playing local things. If they'd open up a Ford dealership or the local Kiwanis Club or Sock Hop, whatever it might have been, the two of us could play and kind of be a band. In a Hoochie Coo, it says there was a band called the Jokers. They were laying it down. Dickie Betts was in the Jokers. The Jokers were playing locally in places where kids my age probably weren't supposed to be there. My dad would take me into this club at night, for instance, and he'd talk the people into letting my kids play, and they would love just to come in and hear the music. And so he'd talk us into the place in the first place, and then he'd actually go up to a band and say, my kid's over there. Well, I'm 9, 10 years old. My brother's younger. And he'd go up to these bands, professional bands in a bar at night and say, do you think they could get up and jam with you? Well, they'd go like, you got to be kidding me. These little kids getting up and jam with us? We got to, we don't want to get fired here. We got a job. And somehow my dad would be strong enough and would ask enough and beg enough that they'd finally go, oh, come on, get the kids up here. And we would actually get up and play. And we played with the Jokers many times. But the bottom line was after we played 1 or 2 times, those people would invite us back and they'd want to get us up on stage because everybody loves a little kid that can play music. My neighbor, one of the guys, when we would play in our garage, he said, my parents, he was a little more well-to-do in some ways than us. He said, if I can talk my parents into buying me a bass guitar, would you teach me how to play? And I said, okay, good idea. Well, he did it. Adventures were very popular at the time, a song called Walk, Don't Run, a huge hit. So I found the easiest song on the album was a song called The McCoy. Now there's guitar, drums, and bass. And we played this song. We could actually play it together as a band, the McCoy. And we all looked at each other and went like, wow, we're a band. We're actually a band, guitar, bass, and drums. And this song, the McCoy, imagine if we called ourselves the McCoys, we'd have a theme song. He decided, this probably isn't going to be my future. I'm going to go away to college. He was a year older than me. Well, we found a kid in town. His name was Randy Joe Hobbs. And Randy Joe Hobbs was a total opposite kind of guy. His family didn't have enough money to buy him a brand new Fender bass. So he found in the pawn shop a Dan Electro guitar that he could get for like $10 or something. And he bought it himself, took 2 strings off of it, and made a bass guitar out of the 6-string Dan Electro guitar. We were playing college functions, we were playing high school stuff, sock hops, dances, all kinds of stuff as Rick and the Raiders, and very popular enough to have gotten to the point where WING in Dayton, Ohio started using us for their shows and stuff. We became a very popular opening act. A lot of times in those days, the opening act would be the kind of house band for whoever the big star was that they brought through. And that's how we got Hang On Sloopy. The star that week was called the Strangeloves. We backed them up as the backup band, opening act and backup band. But the Strangeloves were actually 3 record producers from Brooklyn, New York, Feldman, Goldstein, and Gotterer. These guys, FGG Productions, had produced My Boyfriend's Back and You're Gonna Be in Trouble. Huge hit all over the world. My Boyfriend's Back. Then they did I Want Candy as their own. They called themselves the Strangeloves. So they're bringing in millions and millions of dollars for this record company, Bang Records, and they're making the songs for like $300 or $400 each. So Bang Records said, Bert Burns, the president of Bang Records, wrote My Girl Sloopy. He wrote the song. And a year before, in 1964, it was a huge hit for a black label. So he told these guys, you know, the Beatles are so huge. If we could find 4 young white guys that look like the Beatles and they record My Girl Sloopy, this is going to be a huge record for you guys. So while you're out on the road promoting I Want Candy as the Strangeloves, we'd like you to be looking for these 4 guys who could do Hang On Sloopy for us. It wasn't Hang On Sloopy, it was My Girl Sloopy. The day we were going to open for and back the Strangeloves at Forest Park, we had gone out and bought Beatle suits that day. And we all had Beatle haircuts because we're young kids into this whole movement too. So we all had Beatle haircuts. We went out, we had our gray Beatle suits on, and we go there, and at the sound check, the guys in the Strangeloves go, do you know that we want to sing My Girl Sloopy? We didn't know that they're looking for people to sing this song. Do you know this song? We said, we know that song. We love that song. We can't believe you guys want to do that. So we played My Girl Sloopy with them that night, and they couldn't believe it. It was the last night of their tour. They said, could you tell those boys to come back in our dressing room? They invited us back in their dressing room. So my dad takes us back there, and they say, you guys were great tonight. We loved what you did. It was just fabulous. Would you like to come back to New York City and make a record? And we looked at my dad, and we said, Dad, what do you think? And Dad... this is true. My dad says, my vacation starts tomorrow. We went, wow, so we can actually do this. He said, sure, we can do it. Why not? So we went the next day, followed them in our car, pulling our little trailer with our equipment. We went to New York and we recorded My Girl Sloopy. And we looked in the control room the first night, and we see the engineer and the producers literally jumping up and down and going, number one, number one. They're jumping up and down in the control room yelling, number one. Now, all of a sudden, we're on the road a week or 2 later, and this thing is on its way to number 1, which it became very quickly. So as little kids, we thought, man, is this record business a snap or what? You go in, you record a song, they all jump up and down, yell number 1, and within weeks, it's number 1. They see like dollar signs everywhere, and they just want to go. And not only do they see such big dollar signs, but part of the reason they see such big and many dollar signs is because they know what you just said. They've got a bunch of people that don't have a clue what they're doing. And so first thing they did was they told my parents, because my parents have to sign for us and stuff. They said, you know, you guys might want to have a lawyer look at this contract before you sign it. So let us take you down the hall here and introduce you to a lawyer. So literally, they took my parents down the hall and said, this is the guy over here, Johnny Epstein, and he's the greatest lawyer in town. You should have him look at this contract. You know, well, he probably wrote the contract, is the bottom line. And, you know, he tells them, oh, this is a great contract. You guys sign this thing now. So literally, they signed everything away without knowing a thing. They all made a ton of money. My parents didn't have a clue what they were doing. They were innocents being taken to the slaughter. And we were just happy, you know, hey, we're being treated like the Beatles every place we go. People are screaming and pulling our clothes and autographs and signing parties, and just it didn't stop. So and I look back on it and tell people, they go, do you regret at all that you were being taken advantage of? No. I don't. In any way, it was fabulous. I mean, it was fabulous. I mean, we got cheated out of so much money, but I was given a career. The downside of this story is there's only one way from there when reality sets in, and that's down, because not every record is number one.
It has become the only rock and roll song in the history of the world that's ever been voted an official state rock and roll anthem. One state. And Ohio is the only state in the Union that's had the nerve to vote in a state rock and roll anthem. So we're going to take you guys way back in time now. We're going to play the McCoys' first hit, the Ohio State Rock and Roll Anthem.
Hang on, Sloopy!
As FM radio came into being, there is a whole lot of people being played on FM, and they were considered very cool. These guys are cool. But simultaneously, there was still this other group growing up, and they were called bubblegum music. And the McCoys, since they were from the Midwest, all of a sudden became characterized as part of this same movement. And it didn't matter how soulful we were or how talented we may have been or how good the guys in the band really may have been. We all of a sudden were playing bubblegum music. The McCoys went to this little club in New York called The Scene, and it was considered a very hip place to go and hang out. Jimi Hendrix, I jammed with Jimi Hendrix there many, many times. But Steve Paul allowed the McCoys to get on stage, even as bubblegum artists. He allowed us to get up and jam and play. Played so many times that all of a sudden Steve said, you play here so often, I'm going to start hiring you to come in once in a while, and I'll call you my house band just for the heck of it. He thought that was funny. So Steve actually envisioned us and saw us as being more credible than maybe the music business did. He saw somewhere in an interview with B.B. King that B.B. said, and this is in Rolling Stone magazine, B.B. King said, I saw this albino guy in Texas who was the best blues guitar player I ever heard. Well, Steve Paul said, I want to manage that guy. Who is that albino guy? So he went to Texas and found Johnny Winter, brought him back to New York, and created the album deals and stuff that created Johnny Winter's big career, started it. Well, he was also the guy instrumental of allowing us to be the house band at The Scene. So I got to be more legitimate in that venue at The Scene. Then Steve then brought Edgar to New York and got him his record deal. Steve said, you know, Johnny, you're just so much in the blues, you're limiting your success. We got to put you a little more in rock and roll. So he encouraged Johnny to get a different band. And it was Steve Paul that said, was this a wild concept or whatever? I'm going to put the McCoys with Johnny Winter. This is going to blow people's minds for real. And he saw this thing as possibly happening. But well, he's on that other train over here called legit. And the McCoys are going on that other route called bubblegum. No way we can call it Johnny Winter and the McCoys. So they said, how about if we just drop the McCoys? And the band is now Johnny Winter and. Now it seems like a simple thing. I mean, we all go along with it and go, great, okay, we got a name, Johnny Winter and. But in retrospect, when you look back on it, what a terrible slight to the band, the McCoys, because all of a sudden, in order to be legit, we had to not be the McCoys, when in reality, it was Johnny Winter and the McCoys. There was no way around it. That was the band. The McCoys was the band playing with Johnny Winter. But in order for us to go out and do it, we had to drop the McCoys part. So that, all of a sudden, gave the whole McCoys thing a kind of evil eye. All of a sudden, it had bad connotations. So I have to write a song that is going to bring Johnny more into rock, but at the same time, we're not changing Johnny into something he's not. So, okay, it's rock. So it has to have something rock and roll. Rock and roll. So, okay, even the title says rock and roll. Okay, the title says rock and roll. But then, how else do we tie it into Johnny's past, into his legacy, into his roots? And I said, we got to have blues words somehow in there. Blues stuff. Hoochie, hoochie, coochie man. Hoochie, coochie man. So I said, okay, rock and roll hoochie coo. There you go. Okay, we got a title. A little cumbersome, a little long, but nonetheless, we're tying rock and roll with hoochie coo. And that's all it's about. Now I have an exercise in intellectual skill. Now, if I'm a songwriter and I'm a fairly intellectual guy, how do I make, what song is Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo even about? I had no clue. So I just right away started telling stories about my past. I couldn't stop moving when it first took hold. And I'm thinking of back when I used to go see the Jokers. It was a warm spring night at the old town hall. I would go, hang out at this place. It was like a band stand in this park in Greenville, Ohio. And I'm just seeing this vision. There was a group called the Jokers. They were laying it down. And so I'm just relating real stories from my past that in some ways have to do just with music and rock and roll. And just, I just still didn't know what rock and roll hoochie coo was. And I still didn't when the song was done. Rock and roll hoochie coo. Lordy mama, light my fuse. I don't even know what that means necessarily. I mean, people can try to put really sexual connotations to it. Steven Tyler once told me, he said, I don't write the lyrics on Aerosmith's liner notes. We don't ever write the lyrics. He said, because the audience will always make up a much cooler lyric if you don't let them know what it really is. Oh, I was totally in a bubble. My head was probably about that big around. I probably had the biggest ego in New York City. I was probably a smart aleck doing absolutely stupid stuff in every possible way because, hello, I'm a superstar. But I probably screwed up my career in a lot of ways just by being such a, because I was, I grew into being that person for a while. One of the guys I hung out with a lot in those days, just hanging out at parties and talking, shooting the bull with, was this guy named John Kolodner. And he was just a guy that would hang out at parties, had a big beard, and we'd talk together and stuff. And I was at a party, and David Geffen, who was my first agent with the McCoys after Hang On Sloopy, David Geffen was at this party, and he had just started Geffen Records. And I said, I've just left those people, and I'm kind of on my own. What do you think, man? And David Geffen said, you would be fabulous on my new label, on Geffen Records. I was so stupid, just so stupid. That's such a big head. I went away. Next time I had an opportunity to hang out with one of my friends who was a big writer, press, I told them, I'm going to be on Geffen Records. Whoa! And of course, that was a stupid thing to say. I'm not on Geffen Records. I haven't been signed to Geffen Records. Long way between David Geffen saying I'd like you on my label and being actually signed. So I'm releasing this news to the media without even, just too stupid to know it. Now it's being written about like in Record World or Cashbox or all the big, Rick Derringer says he's going to be signed to Geffen Records. And now I get a call from Geffen Records A&R man at that time, John Kolodner, who I'd said way too many stupid things, been too much of a butt wipe over the years with this guy at parties, not knowing that he was ever going to be the A&R guy for Geffen Records. He's now calling me up, and he's now got a slant, obviously, because he's all upset, saying you're going to get signed to Geffen Records. You haven't been signed to Geffen Records, man. You have to go through me first. So the bottom line is, I was not signed to Geffen Records. at that time, and I probably will never be signed to Geffen Records because I would have to go through John Kolodner again, who I had burned every bridge previous to having that conversation. I burned every bridge up to that time that I could probably burn. And I can't look back at that and say, oh, the record business was wrong. No, I was stupid. Johnny then had some drug problems, put himself in a hospital, and I had been working with Edgar on his album called White Trash, first album. So I called up Edgar and I said, I heard that you aren't satisfied with your guitarist yet that's in the band. Would you like to have me? Can I join your band, Edgar? And he asked me, he said, yeah, that'd be totally cool. So I joined Edgar Winter's White Trash. We did a great album called Roadwork. Edgar wrote it to be a show-off song called the Double Drum Solo. Edgar wrote it so that he could go out and he could play the organ melody, and then he could jump over and play some on the sax, and then he could jump over and play some on the timbales, and it was just that. The record company, when we were about 3/4 of the way through the record company came in and said, as they heard Free Ride and other songs on the record, they said, we think we've got enough hits and stuff on here. This song to us doesn't sound like it should be part of the record. We don't think you should record Frankenstein. Bill Simzik and I both went, what do you mean? This is like the coolest song of the whole project. It was still called the Double Drum Solo. It still didn't have a name. And so we told the record company, well, give us some leeway here. We're going to record the thing. We think it's going to be a good song on the album. We think you'll like it in the end. So even though the record company told us not to do it, we went ahead and recorded it, produced Frankenstein. In the end, we didn't have a title. The record company said, we're going to put out Free Ride. This is going to be a monster hit. So they released Free Ride as the first single. Free Ride wasn't being accepted. It wasn't being played a lot. In fact, the radio stations had gone into the album and taken Frankenstein out and cut it up in their own way to make it short enough to play on AM radio, but they weren't really doing the most tasteful edits in the world in order to play it on their format. It had already been cut up from a huge long version, like 20 minutes long or something, to get it on the album. So that's how it was named in the first place. There were so many pieces of tape that went past that somebody said, this looks like the Frankenstein monster with all this tape, and it became Frankenstein. Well, then it was still too long for AM, so they were still cutting it up into shorter versions. So then now the record company comes in and encourages us, you better go in and do a version that makes more sense so we can release this as a single. So we went in and we did the edited version that we all hear, the radio format. We did a sensible thing. We took all the big long sections, edited them all into smaller sections so we could still have the whole song intact, but in a smaller format. Edgar was happy with the edits. We were happy. Radio stations certainly were happy. They played it. It became a #1 song. Once again, nominated for the Instrumental of the Year. Nominated for a Grammy as the Instrumental of the Year.
In a laboratory once upon a time, at work was a doctor named Frankenstein. You guys have been a great audience tonight.
I tell people, I don't care. I don't necessarily need a hit tomorrow. But what I do need is enough success to allow me to go on doing what I do. Because that's all I really know how to do at this point. And that's all I need. Just enough success to allow me to keep doing it.